Tandem Nomads, episode 250.
You always have this huge positive potential within you. You only have to understand when you're blocking yourself from it.
Hello, Nomad Nation. Welcome to Tandem Nomads, the podcast show and entrepreneurship platform where you can find great inspiration and resources to grow a successful portable business, thrive in your global nomadic life and in any transition that you're going through. And to talk about today's topic, I have a very special guest, Yvonne Hendrych. Yvonne, are you ready for this ride?
Yes, definitely. I'm very ready.
I'm very excited to have you here. So Nomad Nation, few words about Yvonne. Yvonne is a positive, intelligent coach and a life designing expert. Her passion is to support people in creating and living the best version of their lives. After a 10-year career as a lobbyist in Brussels that has ended with an emotional and physical burnout, Yvonne quit her job and moved to Brazil. She helped on a self-healing and self-exploration journey that led her to start her coaching business and support other women on their journey of realigning their values and their dreams with their professional and personal goals. So this is just a very short overview of who you are, and let us know a little bit of where you are now and a little bit of what's happening in your world right now.
I'm sitting almost in the jungle here. I'm in Rio de Janeiro. Actually, I was living permanently in Brazil for a couple of years. And just when I decided that maybe the Brazilian adventure is over, I thought I've done it all. There came the relationship and the big love. Now I'm juggling my life between Munich, my hometown, where I still have my mother and my old friends, and Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. We're trying to, just get the best of both worlds and make it as good as possible when we're not in a pandemic where we're blocked off from traveling and seeing each other.
Oh my God, I can imagine you might have not been able to see your love for at least a year or so, right?
In the beginning, you're so enthusiastic about spending as much time together as possible. And then poof, the pandemic hit. So for 8 months, we weren't able to see each other. It was really a very tough time. So and difficult. For me, I struggled a lot with this. And with my coaching, I have a lot of rational tools, but there was this emotional part within me that was constantly triggered. And, it was almost, I wanted to control the emotions with sheer willpower, which is not working out at all. And in all this, through a coaching colleague, he told me about this training in positive intelligence. And he said, this is an amazing training. See what it does for you. And I was just diving into it. I was digging the whole training. I was just doing it for myself. The first round, it was such a help for me to understand why certain topics trigger me so much.
Interesting.
Why it's just so difficult for me to cope with this pandemic. Whereas I'm a person, I cope with so many things. And I think all your listeners who are expat, we are all masters of coping with difficulties. Otherwise, we wouldn't be on this path. Yeah. But there were certain triggers where I just couldn't get myself around. And with the positive intelligence training, it was clearer for me to see what was going on.
That's interesting. So we are going to talk about that more in details, but it's not your first rodeo with dealing with your emotions and getting to bringing this out to the world as well. Because as I mentioned in the introduction, your journey has started after a burnout when you decided to quit your job. And so can you tell us a little bit about that also and how you got to start your coaching business?
It was not very planned. I was stuck in this career in Brussels, which was a very good career. And in the beginning, I loved it. And I did everything to get there and to get the jobs that I, in the end, got. For me, it was a struggle with myself, with this little judging voice in myself. Why are you unhappy? You've got everything that you want. You planned for this. So what is wrong with you? And it was quite a long process to give myself permission to also stop liking something or stop doing a career that in the beginning I liked, that I invested many years to become a lawyer, but to give myself the permission to say, but that's it. 10 years are enough for this. And this was really a hard process. And luckily, looking backwards now, my body was almost forcing me to stop this. And I was at a point where I was just completely exhausted, emotionally, physically. So for me, I didn't have really a good plan. When I quit my career in Brussels, it was just like, I can't anymore. I couldn't even, lift my suitcase. So I went on a journey. There was a little bit like eat, pray, love journey. I started in India as well with Ayurveda treatment for 2 weeks. I was physically so down. I couldn't even open myself up to new reflections, new insights, if I wouldn't cure my body and my soul before this. And so for 1 year, it was more or less a journey of curing myself, starting to listen again to this little voice that says, Yvonne, maybe the thing you lacked most in Brussels was purpose. Feeling that my work mattered, because I thought, whatever I'm going to do, some will like it, some don't. Why am I even doing this? Would someone care if I'm not doing it anymore? So there was a lot of searching, understanding what had gone wrong, what was the points that I were missing in Brussels. And I gave myself this year.
That's very courageous and important. And it's like you said, you didn't have the choice. Your body was just forcing you to do that. And
yes.
So how many years ago was that? And how long since then did you start your business?
It was now 8 years ago. Afterwards, it took me a little while. I tried out different, volunteer work, dabbled around in certain things, but nothing really clicked. And it was only when I started a program in Brazil where we started to work also with leadership and coaching skills and empowering each other. And this was where I started to understand, oh my God, this world is made for me. And I also realized that people were always asking me, can I coach with you? Can I do this exercise with you? So there was a natural flow for me to do these things. And afterwards, I just jumped in. I said, okay, I give myself again permission to just try it out for years to see how I feel, how things are flowing. And they flew. And that was a great confirmation for myself. From this point on, I was steadily building up this career path, but in a very organic way. I tried out first workshops, then I understood that I really like the very individual work. I tried the methodology of life designing, which is design thinking applied to our lives. I was fascinated about neuroscience, the way we tick in here in our head, and to bring this also to my coaching. And like this, my career was building up organically. It was not a conscious choice.
What a fascinating journey. I always love to see how people get to the point of what they're doing today. So one of the things that we know as entrepreneurs that can often stop us in our journey to succeeding and feeling good about also getting out of our comfort zone is all those self-limiting beliefs. And I've seen it in my journey. I've seen it with my peers and my own clients. Once we know the strategies, once we know all those things that are actually often straightforward to do, one of the things that stops people most are those self-limiting beliefs. And for example, who's going to want to hear from me? Who's going to want to buy from me? All these things that am I good enough for this? And etc. So all these limiting beliefs are an element that can really stop people in their path. We're going to go through those different self-sabotaging beliefs that most people have. But before that, I want to know, according to your experience, you've been living the expat life as well as the solo entrepreneurial life. Why do you think that solo entrepreneurs and expats, you can merge them or talk about it separately if you want, why are these people more likely to actually experience self-sabotaging patterns?
The one thing that I would like to distinguish is a difference between limiting beliefs and self-sabotaging patterns. That's the limiting beliefs, they are just, judgment. The judgment that come up, during the day. Oh, why did you start so late? You should have gone up earlier. Oh, why didn't this person call back? They wanted to call back. No one wants your work. Oh, why are you so slow? Everyone is, blasting out the blog post in half the time. all those things, these are judgment. They are self-judgment. Either we're judging ourselves, or we're judging another person, or we're judging our environment, the things that are happening around us. The other things, those are self-sabotaging patterns. These are special patterns that every one of us has a different set of self-sabotaging patterns, and they usually stem from our childhood. So they start really early in our childhood, and it doesn't have to be something really dramatic that started these self-sabotaging patterns. It's just what made us as a kid survive in the best possible way. Our family structures, the role that we were filling in, all the things that happening around us, maybe a divorce, maybe moving around a lot. And every one of us reacted with building up a different pattern. And the interesting thing about those self-sabotaging patterns, and we think, oh my God, that's such an awful thing to have. No, it's not, because every self-sabotaging pattern stems from an innate strength that we have. So actually, what self-sabotaging pattern is, it's just an overuse of a strength that we have. One of my predominant sabotaging pattern is being an avoider, avoiding difficult conversation, avoiding difficult situation, searching the pleasure, searching the good life. And actually, if it's, it's a strength, because avoider people, they have as a strength an incredible positivity, and they know how to build something good, how to motivate other people, how to create something where everyone feels good and well. And if you overstretch this strength, it becomes an avoider pattern. You're running away from those conversations which actually could deepen a relationship, which are difficult, but they could deepen any relationship. Those tasks which are so important, but which are not pleasurable. So this is something important to understand. We all developed certain self-sabotaging patterns, and we developed them upon our intrinsic strength and the things that we're good at. And the work that we are doing with positive intelligence is actually bringing back this sabotaging pattern to a neutral level, that you can fully tap into the strength that is underlying under this self-sabotaging pattern.
Interesting. So if you're saying, in other words, that we are actually all born or develop over the time certain self-sabotaging patterns, and we, depending on our journey and how we deal with it, we might like quiet those or neutralize them, as you might say, more or less throughout the journey. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct. And the thing is, those self-sabotaging patterns, those saboteurs, they are triggered when we get into a situation that scare us, into a situation of uncertainty, unforeseeability, anxiety, stress. And I think we all know that leading an expat life, building up a solo business, is the highway to stress, uncertainty, anxiety. So
the steroid of self-sabotage.
Exactly. And so the good thing is to be already prepared. And if you understand a little bit about those concepts, I know that if I'm going into this situation, which will trigger certain fears or anxiety or stress, I know that it's very likely that my self-sabotaging pattern will flare up and will show itself. So you can already prepare yourself, and you can be also milder and more self-forgiving. And that's the same thing with our limiting beliefs. Self-judgment doesn't come up when you feel really great, when you're having a great time, when you're, so grounded in yourself, when you're in your flow. They come up when you're triggered by fear, by anxiety, by doubt, and all those negative emotions.
And maybe by change too?
Totally. We are, all of us, we all have this resistance to change. That was our survival mechanism from ancient times, and it's still there. We mistrust change.
Very interesting. I will probably share a little bit of my experience on that because we had an episode about self-sabotaging ourselves a while ago, and I'll link it to this episode. But before we go into your tools and recommendations to
Mhm.
deal with that, I think it's important to, first of all, be able to identify when we are actually entering a pattern of self-sabotage. So how can we identify whether or not we are self-sabotaging ourselves?
The easiest way is by the emotions that we have.
Mm-hmm.
If we are leaning into negative emotions, really unpleasant, scary emotions, that's where we are in a saboteur mode.
Mm-hmm.
But that only tells us, okay, we are in either self-judgment or judgment mode, or we're in a saboteur mode, but it doesn't tell us which sort of self-sabotaging pattern, because there
Right.
are 9 different patterns. So for instance, there's the avoider pattern that I told you about. There is a controller pattern. There's a hypervigilant pattern. There's a victim pattern. There's a hyperachiever pattern. And actually the best way to find out which patterns are very active within you, and sometimes they can change also over the years, but that's, what are currently active in you, is to do the assessment test from the Positive Intelligence Institute. It's a
Right.
free test. You can take it, and I'm sure you will get some really interesting insights about yourself and what to look for. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it feels, you just feel completely overwhelmed. And as I shared, I was so overwhelmed in this pandemic situation with the long distance relationship. And once I understood, oh, wow, my top saboteurs are avoider and controller, and both are triggered like hell through the situation because I can't control a pandemic. It's impossible. And also, you have to be stronger on communication when you're not together, when you're not sharing your day-to-day life, because the communication is all you have. And sometimes it needs to be a difficult conversation. And I was shying away from this. And once I understood my own patterns, it was like, at least I know what I have to look for.
Love that. So, like you said, you mentioned like this test that you would recommend. So, Nomad Nation, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put the link of that free test in the show notes of that episode if you're interested. So you can go to tandemnomads.com/250. And I've done the test, and indeed, there are these 9, I think, right? 9
Mm-hmm.
different profiles of saboteurs
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and to look for. And we won't be able to go into details, but maybe you can explain briefly, like in a couple words, each of them for those who might be interested in knowing what are those different saboteurs.
Would you like to share what are your top saboteurs?
So for me, it's a stickler and
Interesting.
hyperachiever. They're in the same
Very
level.
interesting. Yeah, very interesting. So the stickler is like, maybe we can jump right into those. The stickler is someone who's like uber perfectionist.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very often about, if I don't have all the details right, till really the last element, I cannot start something. And if you start it's really hard that you will be satisfied with the result. It's like there could always be something a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
And this could have worked better, and this could have worked better. This is the stickler.
Mm-hmm.
And what is the strength that is underneath, which is an interesting strength, that is someone who's paying really great attention to details, who has this view of being able to see what are all the individual details. Just if it's overstretched, it's like, oh my God, you can never be happy with your results because there's always something that could have gone better.
Oh, that is so true. And I always say I'm a recovering perfectionist. So, and I keep talking on the show how important it is to not, like, perfection is the enemy of good. And I know so many people in
Yes.
that case who can definitely relate to that. So the second one in the list is hyperachiever.
So the hyperachiever is someone who's also defining himself in an extreme form of this pattern only through the successes and achievements.
Mm-hmm.
And is very linked to the final result. And it's really hard to feel pride, recognition for themselves when you're on the process. So when you're getting there, It has to be the final result. It has to be like the stamp of approval. And then you can feel the pride. And then you can feel that, wow, I've done something great. But it's for someone who has this hyperachiever pattern, it's extremely difficult to celebrate the small steps on the way that are so crucial and that are sometimes so much more valuable and so much more, insightful than the end result.
So good. I love that. I have the feeling that I'm hearing myself throughout the episode when I talk about celebrating every small step. So I guess it is learning experience on the go. The third one is the pleaser.
That's an interesting one. And I can tell you, for my clients, and I work mostly with women, most women have the pleaser. It's this, I'm doing something in order to receive love, receive recognition. It's sometimes to the point where you're not even seeing your own needs anymore. And it's just about pleasing the needs of the others because you think this is the path to recognition and love and fulfillment.
Yeah, that is so often the case for sure. Then we have avoider.
So the avoider is the one I was telling about before because it's my high. A person who shies away from conflict, from difficult situations, difficult conversations, from unpleasant tasks. And it's a person also who easily gets bored if things are not so fun and pleasant anymore.
Interesting. Is that the same as the restless?
It goes in a similar direction, but the restless is someone where it's always about doing, and not even understanding if you like it or if you don't like it. Whereas the pleaser is assessing very carefully, is this a pleasant task? Could this be a pleasant result? For the restless is someone you have to be in action.
Interesting. And then we have hypervigilant and hyper-rational.
So the hyper-vigilant, this is someone who sees danger in everything, in every person, in every situation. And the first thing that comes to their mind is the potential danger. Nothing else. It's the potential danger. So that's the pattern of a hyper-vigilant. And the hyper-rational, that's someone who is relying solely on their rational mind. And they are very proud of their rational mind. And they think the rational mind is the solution to everything. So you can think your way out of every problem, out of every situation. And they distrust emotions because emotions, who knows what they are. And they are very fluctuating. But the rational mind, if something makes sense, it makes sense.
And then we have controller and victim.
Controller, that's the person who wants to control every little detail and who wants to control every little detail that other people are doing. So you're not only controlling yourself, but most importantly, you're trying to control others. You're trying to have control over their emotions, their actions, their results, and this is impossible.
Interesting. And then, the victim.
Yeah, the victim is also a saboteur pattern. And it's interesting because that's the pattern that people really don't like to identify with because they think, no, I'm not a victim. I'm not. But it doesn't mean that you're this typical type of, and I'm small and no one likes me. It's more this pattern of you don't even believe that the good things are happening to you. You don't even believe that there is, this whole positive potential for you. That's something for others, but not for you.
Interesting. So these are really interesting profiles to watch for. And I'm sure, Nomad Nation, if you're listening, you might say, this is maybe me, maybe not. Or you might say, this is so not me. And I have to say that my first reaction was like, this is not me. It can't be. But there's also another factor to consider in the test is also the figure, I guess. It's from 1 to 10, right? And how important is that?
It's not so important as people think because it's just how relative they are towards each other. What is really important of this test is first, is there something that you identify with? And the other thing is also acknowledge the strengths that are underneath these patterns and look for them. And the third, our saboteurs, they, we will always have them for all our life. The thing is only people who did a lot of personal development works, people who are very in tune with themselves, they have learned already a great deal how to co-live with these saboteurs. And it's not about eliminating those saboteurs, because we won't be able. It's just about co-living with them and bringing them back to a level where they're not harming or interfering with your goals, your dreams. And that's why, if you see like, no, I don't see this so strong in me, it might be also that you did already a great deal of work for yourself. You're very mindful about your thoughts, your behaviors. So you already find a good way how to coexist with them, and maybe pay attention just when something is triggering you. Could it be some of them, the top saboteurs? Mm-hmm. And then bring yourself back.
I think it requires a huge emotional intelligence in a way to also watch ourselves in the process, to really also listen to our body. It's often our body that whenever we feel a heartbeat, whenever we feel hot, or we feel nervous or angry, or all those emotions that you mentioned, I think these are fantastic. Actually, negative emotions, what are called as negative emotions, I believe can actually be positive emotions, because they bring awareness, and they're here as signaling to us, pay attention. There's something that you need to process.
That's really perfectly said. I don't like so much this distinction, bad emotions, good emotions, because we need the full spectrum. Mm-hmm. The only thing that is important to understand is what we label the negative emotions. Those are emotions which trigger a certain part in our brain, the survival brain or the saboteur brain, however you might call it. And this brain is responsible for sending a lot of stress hormones, which is responsible for putting us in a tunnel vision, not allowing us to tap into our full potential in this moment, because it's all about surviving. Mm-hmm. It's so important to understand that we take those negative emotions as an information, as a really important information, and then we work with them as fast as possible so that we don't keep activating this survival brain part of ourselves. And that's the key work within positive intelligence, to make being able to understand, oops, there's a trigger, and now I'm starting to shift. And I will also go into an exercise to make this shift as fast as possible, because as faster as we can get out of this survival brain part that we have and can access the sage brain, our innate wisdom, the full potential. But you can also call it your thriving brain, the survival brain, the thriving brain. The task is always to switch as fast over to your thriving brain again, and to train yourself that this is the predominant part of our brain to keep activated. That's the definition of positive intelligence, to being mostly in this thriving part of your brain and act and react from this part.
So can you reuse a very pragmatic example of the process, like a specific saboteur and emotion that, for example, a solo entrepreneur could experience, and how to put in place what you just mentioned here?
I think a lot of solo entrepreneurs, they can get triggered by a controller pattern, or many of us have this controller pattern, and the venture of solo entrepreneurship can trigger this greatly, because you are maybe collaborating with people, but they are not your team. You don't have control over them. And a controller wants this. So for solo entrepreneurs, it can be really stressful to accept that what happens outside of your small realm that you can control, because it's just small when you're a solo entrepreneur, and accept all the huge parts and bits and pieces around you that are not controllable. They have their agenda, they have their plans, they have their businesses. Maybe you're negotiating over doing something together with someone, entering a partnership for a project, whatever, and the other person is not reacting in the way that you hoped or that you liked, and you get really triggered about this, and you question everything, you question the whole project, you question the whole partnership. And the more you get into this vibe, the less you see the potential in it with this, the less you see that this other person in doing it completely different than you has a valid point, has valuable knowledge in it. But the more you're triggered, the less you will see this, and the more you will insist on doing it your way and pushing your agenda.
So why is that a saboteur actually? What would be the consequences of that?
It's a saboteur because if it's done in this way, where you're trying to exert control over another person, over the outcome, other people will feel resentful. Oh, there's someone who wants to push me in a way which is not my way. They will feel unheard. They will feel unseen. And whereas if you would do this collaboration from a point of thriving part of yourself, it's different, you know. You will notice that you act in a completely different way, even if someone is giving you an answer that you don't like. You will be more likely to ask, oh, that's interesting. I never thought that you would think this, or that you would come up with this way of doing it. Let me know more. What's your reason for it?
Yeah, it's important here to also, I love when you say that curiosity factor, asking questions, so that you, instead of accusing or saying this is not the way I want it to be done, and rather approaching it from questions. And I think that's a good point that you're making as well. What I would see most people do actually is the opposite, is to go in the pleasers saboteur and try to please people, because we don't want to disappoint people, especially clients, for example, when they do something or don't pay in time or don't do the right thing. And the tendency would be more like to, I think that's maybe the other side of the controller, the pleaser, who would just let go and let people do whatever they want with them because they don't want to disappoint them.
Totally. And I think this is also, I don't like this kind of stereotypes, but I think this is also a more typical behavior of women, female entrepreneurs. You don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, and let's keep up the good vibe. But if you're honest to yourself, you're not keeping up the good vibe because you're not feeling good in this moment. You feel like there's something in your stomach, like, oh, I wish it would be different. I wish the other person would just do this or this. You are not in a moment where you are totally in tune with yourself, where you say, hey, we're great. I feel they're really happy and I'm really happy. In this pleaser pattern, you don't feel good yourself.
And so how do you recommend to deal if we're in that situation? What are the ways to break that pattern?
The first step in breaking this pattern is recognizing when you're in this pattern. Because is it like, oh, I don't want to harm anyone. I don't want to do anything bad for anyone. And it's done from this deep-rooted feeling of, yeah, that's the best way for all of us. Or if it's done from a point of, I really feel shitty. I really feel like this person is disrespecting me, but I prefer not to say it because maybe I don't like the reaction.
But would a pleaser even notice that? I wonder if a pleaser would even, because we so much want to please, and that's something that I've seen with my client. They're so willing to please their clients because they feel like, oh my God, I've got a client. I don't want to lose this client. So I'm going to accept certain conditions that are not acceptable, and they wouldn't see it as non-acceptable.
My question would always be, how do you feel? How do you feel? You're giving your client the discount and another discount and making it really cheap just to keep them. Do you feel good? Do you feel valued? Do you feel seen? If the answer is no, then you're pretty good on the path of identifying your saboteur. So if it's in the beginning very difficult to just spot the individual saboteurs just like this, then try to spot the emotions. And as you said, use them as your information signal. Why do I feel bad? I gave them what they wanted and I feel bad. What's happening here?
That's great. I think it's so important to do that, to check on our emotions and be honest to ourselves. And I think at the end of the day, for me, the kind of conclusion of this conversation, although we can talk about this for a long time, is to be it's all about awareness. And awareness is super important, to constantly look at our behavior and our beliefs and our emotions, to know, to be aware of how we are actually sabotaging ourselves based on the type we are.
Yeah, totally. And so this is the first step. Just pay attention to what could be your saboteurs. Pay attention to your emotional signals, especially the ones that your negative emotions are sending you through. And then the second step is to switch over in your brain. And that's just really a fun part because it's actually so much more easier than we think. The principle is basically the same that we know from mindfulness, from meditation. But with positive intelligence, we try to do it in very short exercises over the course of the day. So we build this mental muscle up, and also right in those trigger moments. And the way to do these exercises, it's exercises that involve your senses. And for instance, a super simple exercise is, if you feel super triggered in the moment, close your eyes and just for 2-3 minutes, pay attention to all the sounds around you. Like, what is the sound the furthest away that you're still able to hear? What is the sound the closest to you? Where do the sounds come from? Are they very loud? Are they soft? Are they man-made? Are these animals? And just stay 2 minutes in this paying attention. And within 2 minutes, something shifts in our brain. And it's exactly this shift from survival to thriving, from saboteur to sage, that happens in these instances where we activate our senses. Because when we consciously activate our senses, we are no longer in survival mode. In survival mode, we don't notice any sounds around us. It's like just this fight, flight, or freeze. It's just, I don't know if it's cold, if it's hot. I don't know if there are people around me, if it's, noisy or not. It's just pure reaction. And as soon as we start paying attention to our sentences and do this for 2-3 minutes, something shifts in our brain.
This is so good. So important.
And it can be really simple exercises. And what I really love this, because different to meditation, where you have to get out of maybe even your seat or your routine, or 15-20 minutes to really calm down. This is something that can be so short and so quick, and even like rubbing your fingertips together and just paying attention to every little detail you feel on your fingers. And this is something you can even do when you have a difficult conversation and you start feeling your trigger coming up. Like, go to this exercise, even within a conversation. No one will see it if you do it under the table and just, rub your fingertips together, but pay attention to this. Do this shift in your brain consciously. Yeah. And don't do it just once. It's like a little mindfulness training through the day. And the best is to start to doing it 3-4 times a day, just 2 minutes, and that's it.
That's a fantastic tip. And I can relate to that a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with a personal leadership methodology that's called attending to emotions and stillness. And I think this is a little bit of that, like really taking, even sometimes it's just few seconds, and that habit of constantly just taking, like whenever somebody, for example, annoys us, for the moment, just closing our eyes, just listening to what's happening around, then taking a breath, and then realizing, okay, it's not the end of the world. Yes. I can deal with that. Just that moment. And like you said, I love when you talked about making it an exercise, a routine to do it regularly. It's something, it becomes part of our day-to-day life and way of living, to attend to those emotions so that we can stop those sabotaging behaviors along the way.
Yes. For people who are working with clients a lot and who might know that they will have a difficult conversation with a client, just to do this before the conversation, 2-3 minutes, and you will feel so much more grounded. And I do this before I start any coaching sessions, I do this just to make sure that I'm not triggered by anything around me, to be really present. And this is so fast, but it's really this grounding in yourself and tapping into this brain part, as we said, that taps into your creativity, your resourcefulness, the innovation, the empathy, all those senses that you need to be at your best for the work that you want to do, the work that you want to bring into the life. And especially as an entrepreneur, we have to be at our best.
This is so good and such a great way to end this conversation. And I love this message that you shared about how important it is to simply want that best for ourselves. And it's also about self-care. It's not just about success.
Yes.
It's also about taking care of ourselves, our needs, and our mental health ultimately as well. And I think that's important on top of all of the reasons and the goals that might drive us throughout this journey.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, for these great insights that you shared with us today, enlightening us with these great patterns and ways to deal with them. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know, where's the best place to find you?
Best place is to find me through my website, workinbalance.org. And you can also access the assessment test through the website. It gives you some more additional information, and you can also book a free short call with me if you just want to dig shortly into the saboteur test results. And also you can join me on Instagram.
Fabulous. We will share all these in links and important information to find you, Yvonne. Nomad Nation, make sure to go to tandemnomads.com/250 and you'll find all this information. Thank you again, Yvonne, for sharing your great experience with the topic and your journey with us.
It was such a pleasure, this conversation for me.
Well, the pleasure was mine. And Nomad Nation, I hope that you find some great inspiration for yourself. Check in those different profiles of saboteurs. And as I often say, stay tuned to turn your challenges into great opportunities. And hopefully this was one of those episodes that will help you along this way. Can't wait to meet you in the next episode.